这样那个还没有讲楞严经之前
Before the actual class of Surangama Sutra, I would like to address a few things. Firstly,
学习无部大论为主的各个
we're currently
论点的话呢，一如既往
studying the Five Treatises, and it is ongoing. Mainly everyone's focusing on it, and I think it would be extremely essential to also engage in the actual practice of it. Our mentor classes and our post-class presentations are still going as usual. The majority of you are doing really well. You're being very diligent and proper in your studies and contemplation and practices. My classes are also ongoing. For this week and next week, that's the plan. Previously, within about over a month of time, I've already readjusted and rebalanced many of the relationships and many of the conditions, dispelled various kinds of obstacles. So now everything started to settle down. I've had many meetings throughout that period of time. Within a short period of time, Khenpo will return to Larangar, and for now, I've already handled and resolved many of the issues. Currently, we are running smoothly in terms of our daily management. The Khenpos and Khenmos are working very hard to maintain the smooth running of the Sangha. I myself, on one hand, it is because that I've overexerted myself in high altitude. On the other, I have to engage in translation and many other things that I have to deal with. So many couldn't find me, but finding me is not important. What you need to do now is to focus on your own study and contemplation and practice. Or you can look for the nature of your mind, which is more important than looking for me. I hope that everyone over here would try your very best to exert in the study, contemplation, and practice. Nowadays, this is a good way to study the Dharma. This is quite normalized way of studying the Dharma now. Even when we talk about it in a global setting. And I think this is quite a wonderful way too. So I hope when you're studying the Surangama Sutra and other classes, I wish you could exert all of your effort and pay great attention. Other than that, I don't have any other things to address.
娘这进步做的挺没讲，总的么能进步，俺别的把个人打工上多些么多，东把推荐将来给上咱儿，那就是我在人家公司，家伙推荐上了也拉嘛。The
answered past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons, and now see it here, receive and uphold it, about to fathom that of its true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta.
Let
us continue with our class on the Surangama Sutra. Currently, we're talking about the 9th seeing out of the 10 types of seeings. Yesterday, we already got to the part, we've already covered the part that seeing is spontaneous. It is not of causes and condition. But that title is rather quite long. In the commentary, it says that the 9th one is seeing transcends the ordinary. It transcends deliberate effort, according to some commentaries.
它是这个不生不灭的。那这样的话，跟外道的这个
Also, we've covered on the question asked by Ananda, saying that, well, if the world honored one is talking about the condition of enlightenment pervades the 10 directions and it is everlasting, then what's the difference between the Buddhist view versus that of the heretic view? Also, the Buddha gave a lecture at Mount Lanka on Lankavatara Sutra, where he talked about the different views of the heretics, and he also talked about how the Buddhist view is based on causes and conditions. Therefore, are there any contradictory to the reliant on causes and conditions? Also, the nature of enlightenment is pervasive to the 10 directions. So these are the two questions posed by Ananda. And then Manjushri also posed some questions to the Buddha. So now the Buddha started to answer the questions. The Buddha over here told Ananda, saying that now I have instructed you with such expedience in order to tell you the truth. Yet you do not awaken to it, but mistake it for spontaneity. After Ananda asked this question, Ananda then compassionately answered Ananda by saying that, well, today I am giving you various kinds of expedient means. Because Ananda kept on asking questions, and then the Buddha, by relying on various kinds of examples and metaphors and the skillful means to expound the teaching to Ananda. So the Buddha said that in order to tell you the truth, I use all kinds of expedient means. And then the Buddha said that, yet you do not awaken to it, but mistake it for spontaneity. The Buddha said that I've tried to tell you the truth through various ways, but you're still quite confused of understanding my point. You still think that seeing nature is out of spontaneity. So Ananda thinks that it is either a production of spontaneity or a production of causes and conditions. And then Buddha continued to say that if it definitely were spontaneous, you should be able to distinguish the substance of spontaneity. The Buddha then told Ananda by saying that if you think there is something that is spontaneous, that is without production, without cessation, that is permanent, if there is something like that, that is the seeing nature, then you have to analyze to its core to fully see the nature of it. That is to say that if after detailed analysis you really see there is something as the self-nature, as the seeing nature, and the seeing nature is a production of spontaneity, then you should be able to see this spontaneity's nature. And then the Buddha continued to say that, and now you look into the wonderful bright seeing. What is it that is itself? What is itself? Does the seeing take bright light as itself? Does it take darkness as itself? If you think there is something that is a spontaneity, then you have to point to that spontaneity. So you have to first observe from your seeing nature, and then while you make such observation, look at what is spontaneity. The Buddha continued to ask, well, does the seeing take the bright light as itself? Does the seeing take the darkness as itself? Does it take emptiness as itself? Does it take solid objects as itself? These are the four conditions associated to the spontaneity.
或者呢就是以这个善为自然的啊，就是除了这几个途径以外的话
Do you take brightness, darkness, emptiness, or the solid objects as spontaneity or as itself?
其实有好几种这个
Other than these four types of methods to distinguish, then there's no other ways.
啊，就是要么你认为是这个命为这个你的见性，要么暗为见性，要么你空或者是色为见性，善为见性。
So either you point to the brightness or darkness as its self-nature, or emptiness or as a solid existence as its self-nature. And then the Buddha continued to tell Ananda, Ananda, if itself consists in light, you should not see darkness. Moreover, if it takes emptiness as substance itself, you should not see solid objects. The Buddha then continued to help Ananda to make this distinguishment by saying that when you're analyzing it, if you were to say that brightness is itself, then it should be constant and permanent. In that way, you should not be able to see darkness. If it changes, if you do see darkness, then brightness cannot be its nature. Otherwise, you shouldn't be able to see darkness. For the same reason, if you were to think that emptiness is as its nature, then it should not bring you to the seeing of solid object because they are all empty, and vice versa. After such logical analysis, out of the four types of the characteristics, there is also a darkness. If you were to take darkness as itself, then you should not be able to see brightness, because if you were to see brightness, then you simply eradicated its nature, that is darkness. If you were to think that itself, the nature itself as spontaneity is also darkness, it cannot be changed, then that means when you, for example, abandon darkness, the nature has changed to brightness. In such a way, you have already given up on its nature. The nature of itself has been eradicated. The nature of the itself being darkness has been eradicated so that you can see brightness. This spontaneity, the itself, the self, or the creator, or the doer, is considered as solidly existent according to certain schools in Hinayana and some of the heretic schools. They feel that there is something existent that cannot be changed. According to Mipham Rinpoche's commentary on the ornament of Madhyamika, he discussed in great length about this part. He said that as long as you think there is something that is solidly existent, then you should not be able to perceive such kind of variety of objects. So let's look at ourselves. Do you think our mind is something that is bright or dark? Do you think the nature of it is empty or solidly existent? When you search for the nature of it, you would not be able to find anything that could define it. There is nothing that is substantial about it. This is really the key point that is discussed over here. And then Ananda continued to ask the Buddha by saying that Ananda said, I am certain that the nature of this wonderful seeing is not spontaneous. Now, I discern that it is produced from cause and conditions. After the Buddha helped Ananda to make analysis on how the spontaneity being nature cannot be the case, then Ananda further asked, then this seeing, this wonderful seeing, which was previously translated as the essence of seeing or the seeing nature, it says that the essence of seeing or the seeing nature, in fact, the nature of it is not spontaneity. However, when the Buddha was giving the teaching at Mount Lanka in the Lankavatara Sutra, the Buddha said that everything derived from causes and conditions. So Ananda at that time then fall back onto the causes and conditions. Ananda said that when it must be based on causes and conditions. So he said, now I discern that it is produced from causes and conditions, but I do not yet have it clear in my mind. I now ask the thus come one, how this idea is consonant with the nature of cause and conditions. Because Ananda is quite confused. If the nature of mind is causes and conditions, is production from causes and conditions, then it definitely is impermanent because it is a dharma of arising and ceasing. However, previously we've learned that the nature of enlightenment is all-pervasive to the 10 directions, and it is clear and constant or permanent. Therefore, Ananda started to have this question. I think we sometimes, if you really observe your own mind, you probably would get very confused as well. When we studied, for example, the flight of the Garuda or the treasury of Dhammadhatu and all of those direct pointing out instructions, it sounds very direct, and then we feel quite helpful. And there are lots of you who would feel that hopeful, and they feel they recognize a little bit of the nature of mind. But when it comes to the Surangama Sutra, especially for those people who felt that they probably see a little bit of the nature of mind, after these questions going through, they probably feel that they don't have confidence anymore. After the questions and answers given by the Buddha, you probably feel quite doubtful. But you don't have to worry. Why is that? It is because the teachings given here is by logical analysis, and the nature of mind, especially a seeing nature aspect of it, is can be taken in by a certain group of sentient beings, and they can understand and they can even attain enlightenment and realization by the analysis of Surangama Sutra. And another group can rely on the simple and direct pointing out by taught in the Tantrayana or the Zen traditions. So it is really very much depending on the capacity of sentient beings. But out of all the sutras, the Surangama Sutra is indeed really well known. There are people who can attain liberation based on their own faith, and some by other methods. So you don't have to worry too much about it. But I think listening to the Surangama Sutra could definitely help you to recognize where you understand and where you don't understand, where you feel that you kind of understand and kind of don't, and where you feel that you understand but you forget about it afterwards very quickly. So it's quite important to develop faith, first of all, and then you have to develop a sense of respect and joy when you're receiving this teaching. If you were to be able to do that, then you'll be able to gain a great deal of attainment or achievement. It is just like when we are studying from a worldly teacher. If you really like that teacher, then you like that class or the subject that teacher teaches. And you would remember the teachings from that teacher for a long period of time. On the other hand, if you don't like certain teacher, you would not enjoy his or her class, and you would not be able to gain any benefit benefits. So that also applies to Buddhism. So if you have great faith, deep faith, by relying on this faith, the power and the benefit you'll be able to receive on your own mind stream is extraordinary. Therefore, when it comes to reading the Dharma texts, I think we should supplicate to Shakyamuni Buddha again and again and make the aspiration that may I read it again and again.
接下来就是阿难就是由中间跟
After Ananda asked this question to the Buddha, the Buddha then said, "You say it is causes and conditions. I ask you again." Since Ananda said that it is a production of causes and condition, then the Buddha said that, now let me ask you, Ananda. So we can see that there's a lot of coming back and forth between the Buddha and Ananda. Then Buddha said that because you're now seeing, you said it is causes and conditions. I ask you again, because you are now seeing, the seeing nature manifests. The Buddha now started to analyze from the two aspects. One is cause and the other one is condition. So from the cause aspect, now let me ask you a question. Is it because of light that the seeing exists? Is it because of darkness that the seeing exists? Is it because of emptiness that seeing exists? Or is it because of solid objects that the seeing exists? Since you think that it is a production of causes and condition, then let me ask you about the cause. Are you relying the brightness or darkness or emptiness or solid existence as the cause of your seeing? So what is it out of the four types of causes? Of course, majority of you know that this seeing nature is, you cannot say that it is a production of the four causes. But the Buddha over here asked Ananda. And then to further analyze it for Ananda to demonstrate to him, the Buddha said, Ananda, if light brings it into existence, you should not see darkness. And if it exists because of darkness, you should not see light. It is the same with emptiness and solid objects. Because if you see, because if you're seeing nature is a production of lightness, then whenever there is light, it is there. Whenever light disappears, you will not be able to see the nature when it's dark. And vice versa, also when it comes to emptiness and solid existence. The Chinese translation for the object is actually blockage, so emptiness and blockage, but in the Tibetan translation, it is emptiness and objects. So the explanation goes, well, if you think the nature of it is because of, if you think the nature of seeing is caused because of light, then you can never see darkness, and vice versa. If you think it's emptiness, then you can never see objects, and vice versa too. According to the commentary of the correct lineage, it says that with the causes that can be explained as seeds, and the conditions are the contributing conditions. I think this is a better way of explaining it. Some other masters didn't explain it in the way that separates the causes and conditions, and it would be a little bit more difficult to explain. But I think Ananda's question talks about causes and conditions. Therefore, when it comes to the Buddha's answering, the Buddha also gives the answers based on causes and conditions too. So again, the Buddha gives the answers based on brightness, darkness, emptiness, and objects. And then he continued to answer about the questions based on the conditions as well. He said that if it exists because of the condition of emptiness, then you should not see solid objects. If it exists because of the condition of solid objects, you should not see emptiness. It is the same with light and darkness. Because they're contradictory they're contradictory conditions. They're contradictory to begin with. Therefore, you cannot take the contradictory properties as conditions. So when it's empty, then you won't be able to use it as the condition for emptiness, and vice versa. And same applies to light and darkness. So if you use lightness as the condition, then there is no darkness, because the contributing conditions is the lightness. Or if you take darkness as the contributing condition, in the same way, you can no longer have brightness as the condition. This is the Buddha's analysis to expound that this seeing nature is not a production of causes and conditions. When the great masters use various methods to point out the nature of mind to the disciples so that they can recognize it, they would use various kinds of means, various kinds of skillful methods. However, those skillful methods are only demonstrated so that the disciples can recognize what is already intrinsically existent to all of them. To further demonstrate that point, let me give you an example of space. The space itself is unconditioned. However, if the wind can dispel the clouds to reveal space, you cannot say that because of the causes of wind and the causes and condition of wind that dispel the clouds, which gives a production of space. So when it comes to seeing nature, I think this is the way to understand it, though it is difficult to understand. When it comes to the seeing nature, is it a production of causes and condition? The Buddha then further analyzed it to separate causes and condition, and asking Ananda, is it really a production of causes or is it a production of conditions? And then the Buddha gave the conclusion by saying that, thus you should know that essential, enlightened, wonderful brightness is due to neither causes nor conditions, and it does not arise spontaneously. So this essential, enlightened, wonderful brightness, this is another term that the Chinese translation is using over here. But this particular essence is not due to neither causes nor conditions. nor does it
然而呢，也
arise
并不是这个
spontaneously.
自然而产生的，就是前面讲的什么生我也好，就是佛教的内道的自然也好，就是不是自然而
Not
产生，
the
也并不是呢，就是不
spontaneous
自然，就是也不自然的一个
production
东
or
西来就是产生
spontaneously
的，也不
present
是。
in
那
either
还有呢，
the
就是无非不非
heretic traditions
无
or
是不
that of
非
the
实，就是
Buddhism
也就是它这
teachings.
里原理就是这个四性论吧，
It
啊，
is
就是
not
也
that
没
which
有
is
呢，
not
就是非和
spontaneous.
不
It
非，
is not
啊，
that
就
it
是
is
没有这
not,
个非和不
nor
非，
is it
也
that
没有
it
呢，
is
就是
not
是和
not.
不是，
It is not
实际上
that
是我
which
们就是
is or is
这个
not.
有
This
无
is
是
the
非，或者说是右
explanation
边无
on
边，
the
然后
four
这个有无
extremes.
二边，就是
So
逆
parting from the
界，
four
就是
extremes,
逆二
neither
俱变，
is
就是
nor
就这
is
样的，
not,
就是原
neither
理四边吧，就是实也不是，非也不是，
it
非
is
是也不是，
not,
非
nor
是非
is
非也不
it
是，就是这
that
样的
it
一个
is
境
not
界。
not.
那最后的话呢，就是逆一切相，即是一切法，就是那真正就是我们要通达就是坚信的时候呢，就是实际上是原来是远离一切相的，这就是一
Any
切法的
dharma
这个真
is
相
that
啊，
which
就是
is apart
凡
from
所有
all
相皆是虚
characteristics.
妄，什么这
Whatever
个
you can perceive with
若见诸相
characteristics,
非
they are
若
simply the
见诸相
illusions.
非相
If
即
you
是
were
见如
to
来，是吧？就是
see
即
the
是见如来，就
characteristics
是心
as
经金刚经
without
当中有吧，
characteristics,
就是凡
one
是
is
所有
seeing
的
the
这
true
些
Buddha.
真正的这个相呢，就是全
So
部都
all the
是物态的
characteristics,
话呢，
if
就
we
是
can
这是
part
真
from
正
all
的
of them, then
这个
that
实
is
相啊，
the
就是说
truth.
是义物即不中，就是禅宗呢经常讲啊，就是说是真正的有
As
一个
it
这
is
个
stated
如果
in
东
the
西的
Zen
话，那就
tradition,
是
it says
那
that
实际上
if
是
you were
是
to say
它
that
并没
it
有
is
就是
one
通达了，
thing,
就是
then
真信
you
啊，
have
大
not
乘七行论当
understood
中
it.
也是说啊，就是说是一切
According
法
to
从
the
本地来
Mahayana
呢，
Shraddhotapada
逆
Shastra,
缘
it
所
is says
向
that
啊，逆因
therefore
所
all
向，
the Dharma
逆缘行相
is
啊，
parting
毕竟
from
平当
the
不可破坏吧，就
characteristic
是
of
大概也
speech,
是这
of
样
name,
啊讲
of
的，就是说
the
就是真正
conditions.
的这个法的话呢，就是
For
什么
such a
语言
reason,
呐、
it is
思
of
维啊，
all great
所有的这些
equanimity.
学人呢，就是都已经离开了。
So
所
the
以
true
这
Dharma,
个阿难的话
the
呢，就
true
是现在
essence
也
is
应该就是比较明白，
devoid
就是
of,
所谓的这种
is
见性
parted
的话
from
呢，就是实
speech,
际上
from
是并不是
conception,
是它是一个自然
is
的东
parted
西，
from
就
all
好像
kinds
外道
of
所承认的那样，真的
elaborations.
有一个事物啊，就
I
变
think
于
at
一
this
切的
point,
东西，
Ananda
不是这
started
样的。
to
然
understand
而也
it.
并不是呢，就是依靠就是中卦的卦，就是中度
The
的
sea
度，就是
nature
像
is
这样
not
的一种因
something
缘当中这个
that
产
is
生的。那这是如果
spontaneous,
是真是这样的
like
话
the
呢，它
ones
就不
that's
是真正的见性，就是它是一个世俗的因
decided
缘
or
而
the
已。
ones that's
所以呢，
recognized
就
by
是
the
最后得
heretics
出来的结论
tradition,
是什么呢？
nor
就
is
是
it
你一切相，
something
即是一
that
切法。
is a
如
solid
今任何
existence
语
but
种
pervading
所
everything.
行呢，以世
It
间
is
细论
not
冥
something
想
that is
而得分
a
别，
fruition
然后
of
就
certain
佛陀的
seeds
话呢，就是又
based
开
on
始这
causes
个
and
呵斥
conditions.
啊，就是这
If
个阿
you
难
were
的。
to
所以
think
你
that
今
the
天
sea
你
nature
如
is
今的
any
话
of
呢，
those,
为什么
you
是
have not
还是
seen the
在
true
这
nature.
样的这种境界当中呢，
Those,
一直
all
打
of
转
those
的，
stated
一直
above
的
are
这种
simply
拓
the
行，用
causes,
心去做，
conditions,
或者是你这样的
and the
这种
production
一直是在
of
自己的分别的这种
conventions.
圈子当中呢，就在这个扭转呢，就是一直
The
拔不
Buddha
出
said
来
that
啊，就
now
是
in the
你
midst of
你就为
dharmas,
什么是
how
这
can
样
you
的？
use your mind
实践
to
的一
make
切的这些
distinctions
细
that
论
are
和冥
based
想
on worldly
而这个分别啊，
sophistics,
你为什么是这个世间的
terms, and
什么世间当中
characteristics?
的各种各样
That
的
is
这种
like
执着
grasping
啊、
at
冥想
empty
啊、
space with your
执着
hands.
啊、细论啊，那这些当中
So
呢，
the
就是
Buddha
一直
said
这个
that,
得分
started
别
to scold
为什么是
Ananda by
一直
saying
是
that
这样的？
why
我
are
给
you
你讲了
still
那么多次的
taking
教研，
turns
有时
and
候的话
getting
呢，确实
sucked
阿难是
into
一种
this
怎么实现的？
conventional
但是我们凡夫人的
distinctions?
话呢，的确也是这样的。
Why
有
are
些
you
人可
still
能依据这
grasping
个
with your mind,
这个
grasping
善知识的话呢，就是已经就是多
onto
少多
various
少
kinds
年
of
了，就是已经
conceptions
这个
and
10几
couldn't
年，
pull
就是
yourself
什么
out of that
20年。
quagmire?
但是一直
At
呢，
that
好
time,
像还是在那
Ananda
个自己的
already
这
relied
种
on the
自我
Buddha
的这种
for
分别
over
念当
20
中
years,
自我的
and
这种
he
实践的这种
seems
迷眼
like
的分别
still
念
being
当中啊，
trapped in
实践
his
人是各种
dualistic
各样的
mind
这种
in all
颠
kinds
倒的
of
相，我们都知道
conventional
是就是
terms
常乐我
and
净，就
speech.
常乐我净就是实践的颠倒。
But
但是我
the sentient beings in this world, the worldly beings, they naturally have all kinds of false conception. They hold on to permanence, bliss, self, and purity in a false way. But this is our mind. At the beginning of studying Dharma, that's how we were. And then after years of studying it, there are still people who had not reduced their self-grasping nor of the dualistic thoughts. Rather, even a group of them started to have more of those false conceptions. So the Buddha scolded him by saying that, why are you grasping onto those things which does not exist, just like the moon reflected in the water and the daughter of a barren woman? By holding onto it is just like grasping space with your hand. It's like you're trying to hold on to space, trying to touch space, trying to massage space, trying to tie a knot with space, which is completely impossible. In Mipa Rinpoche's commentary on Madhyamika, he said that this is simply diligence in vain, without any point, completely meaningless. If you were to think that there is a way to hold on to space, to grasp space, to live in the midst of the space, and thinking of the flowers in midst of space, how could any of those to happen? It doesn't happen at all. In fact, if you want to see the nature and hold on to the nature being something that is spontaneously, constantly existent thing, and being a production of causes and conditions, that is completely absurd. Now let's look at the 10th question or 10th aspect. Though there are various titles to it, the title is Seeing is apart from seeing. The seeing is apart from seeing. Ananda said to the Buddha, if the nature of the wonderful enlightenment has neither causes nor conditions, then why does the world-honored one always tell the bhikshus that the nature of seeing derives from the four conditions of emptiness, brightness, the mind, and the eyes? What does that mean? In the last question of Ananda, after receiving an excellent reply from the Buddha, Ananda then started to ask another question. A personality trait of Ananda is that even if Ananda got scolded from the Buddha, he would not get upset with the Buddha. Compared to the disciples nowadays, if our teacher were to scold us in front of many disciples in a large assembly, I think not many people would be able to ask questions afterwards. They probably won't have such courage, even if they were to have more questions. But Ananda is indeed very different in such a way. That is why he kept on following the Buddha throughout his life and relied on the Buddha as his teacher. So Ananda over here then asked another question with his persistence. And that's something that we should learn from him too. And the Chinese term that's used here, the nature of the wonderful enlightenment, that's another term that's used to describe the seeing nature. The seeing essence, the true mind. We've already covered that it is not cause. It is not a production of cause nor condition. And then Ananda asked the Buddha by saying that, well, isn't that you always tell bhikshus that the nature of seeing derives from 4 conditions? Of emptiness, brightness, the mind, and the eyes. Without those conditions, if it is without these conditions, as you've stated, then why would you give teachings on that through the Vinaya Sutra, where you've already told the bhikshus that it is because of the 4 conditions you would be able to see the nature of mind? Where you said that through the emptiness of through the condition of emptiness, you would be able to see what is existent, and as through the condition of brightness, you would be able to see what is manifested. Through the condition of mind, you would see what is known, and through the condition of eyes, you will be able to perceive. If now your reply to my previous question is that the seeing nature is not a production of causes and conditions, isn't that contradictory to your previous teachings in the other teaching situations? Then how could you say that? The 4 conditions, according to the commentary of the right lineage, where it says that the Chittamatra school recognized that there are 9 types of conditions. The Theravada recognized that there are the 4 types of conditions. So over here, Ananda said it is the 4 conditions. The seeing nature needs the 4 conditions. So what are the 9 conditions then? The first one is condition of emptiness, because without emptiness, there is no way that you would be able to perceive anything. That is to say, if everything's blocked from your eyes, then you won't be able to see anything if there's any blockage in between. The second condition is that the second condition is a condition of brightness. With brightness, we will be able to perceive. The third one is the condition of roots, such as the roots of the eyes, of the ears. Without those kinds of dominating conditions, we will not be able to perceive anything. The fourth one is the object condition, but over here, the object doesn't point to the external phenomena. Rather, it is the consciousness that preserves the external objects or phenomena, because this is according to the teaching of Chittamatra school, the mind-only school. So they do not come to the recognition of the external object being true. The fifth one is the mind of wanting to perceive as a condition. The sixth one is the core condition. The core condition should refer to the 8th consciousness, which then refers to the seeds of perception. And then the 7th one is the defiled phenomenal conditions, the 7th consciousness, the manas. And the 8th one is the differentiating consciousness, differentiating conditions. And the differentiation that is referred here is probably the 6th consciousness, the mind consciousness, and the 9th one is the seed consciousness. The consciousness as a seed. Many of the Chittamatra school, based on their own opinion, their own philosophical doctrines, they started to split all the conditions based on the consciousness. Therefore, it is divided into the 9. Anyhow, over here we're talking about only the 4, the emptiness, brightness, root consciousness, and the mind consciousness. We can also divide it in such a way. I think whenever people have time, it could be useful to further analyze the 9 conditions according to the Chittamatra school as well. And for those of you who are currently studying Buddhist logic, if you can understand it or analyze it through the various kinds of conditions and causes that's taught in the Treasury of Valid Cognition, where it talks about all kinds of causes and conditions and the difference of perceiving the objects, there are some subtle differences too. When it comes to Ananda's question and his angle, according to some commentary, it says that the point of view of Ananda's question are mainly based on his eyes. But the Buddha mainly gives the answer following the mind. Usually we say that seeing is true, but over here it is the mind, whatever is based on mind is true. This is different because the point of views are very different. Those who believe in materialism or the existence or any of those schools that holds on to a true existence, they would hold on to the eyes or the eyes perception. But when it comes to the Mahayana and anything above Chittamatra school, then they would place more of importance on the mind seeing. After Ananda asked this question, the Buddha then told the Buddha by saying that, Ananda, what I have said about the worldly causes and conditions has nothing to do with the primary meaning. This is quite crucial. He said that though in different kinds of teaching situations I've already expounded the causes and conditions about our animated and inanimate world, and I've already talked about the causes and conditions of all phenomena. If you remember, the Buddha said that everything rises because of causes and conditions, everything ceases because of causes and conditions. This is the teaching of the great Buddha, of the great Shramana. But this is the causes and this is the Dharma of causes and conditions. However, this teaching is not the primary meaning. It's not the absolute. Rather, those teachings are given to guide the sentient beings in this world, to guide the Shravakas, to guide the ordinary beings so that they will not fall into the lower realms. Because many people in this world, they think that things occur without a cause. In order to refute their opinion or their belief system that things occur without cause, therefore the Buddha talked about the causes and conditions. Also, there are people who then think that there are constant causes, there are then the wrong causes, and because they rely on the wrong causes, they would, of course, reap the fruition of suffering. So the teachings of causes and conditions that's taught by the Buddha are given to the sentient beings out of secretive, skillful means. According to Lankavatara Sutra, it says that all kinds of phenomena is without birth. This is the primary teaching. This is the absolute. However, the foolish ones, the ordinary foolish ones, they would fall into the lower realms if they were to hold on to this primary teaching. Because the foolish ordinary ones, they would hold on to either existent or not existent. Therefore, the Buddha gives the teaching of causes and conditions. But the way he gives those teachings on causes and conditions is to guide sentient beings, a group of sentient beings. And then the Buddha continued to say that, Ananda,
实践人说的这个我能见啊，就是实践人说
Let me ask you another
说的
question.
这个我能见到，比如说我见到
People in this world say, I can see.
那就是什么叫做
What is meant by
什么
seeing?
叫做
What
没有
is
见
not
现在佛
seeing?
陀就开始这个阿难就是去这个考试吧，就是这
The
个见和
Buddha
不见的
now
话
started
就
to
随着时
give
间
a
而
quiz
做的
to
话呢，就是
Ananda
可以说是
by
这样
saying that
说
while
但
the
实
world
际
be
上
being
如果我
said
们观
that
察的
they
话
can
呢
see,
实践的见和不见的
now
话
what
呢
is
就是不
seeing
计
and what
其
is
实
not
观察
seeing?
的意思
Because
就
the
是啊
seeing
就是
and not
我
seeing
虽
by
然
the
说过
worldly
阴阳
in the
法，但是
worldly
这个阴阳
sense,
法呢，最
they
终我们用
are
因理分析的
not
时候呢，啊，就不能
trustworthy. They're not
不能这个
reliant.
经得起责任的。为什么呢？就是下面不信的话呢，我问你这个一
Now
个
let
问
me
题。
ask you a question. The Buddha
然后
said,
阿难就是回答说啊，就是实人因为呢，就是有这个
Ananda
灯
then to
光啊，
reply this question
有
by
这
saying
个
that due
日
to the
光、
light
有
of the
月光，
sun,
就
the
是
moon,
日
and
夜灯
lamps,
的这种光呢，见种
people
种
in the
相，
world
名字
can
为
see
呢
all
就是
kinds of
见。这个我们
appearances.
经常也
That
说
is
的啊，
called
就是白
seeing.
天有这个太阳的光，月
We
亮的
usually
光，或
would
者
say
是说
yes
有这个
because
灯的
of the
光的时候，
sun, the
那就是
moon,
就
and the
光照亮
lights
以后呢，就是
that
照耀
comes
一切的
from
时候，
lamps.
我们山河大地也好，就是什么这个
Then
蛇
we
仔
can
也
see
好，瓶子
everything,
柱
all
子
the
也好，什
phenomena
么现
world,
象
the
都是可以见
scenery,
的，
the
这个叫无
houses
见。
and the
如夫
vase
物
and
质
the
三种
pillars. We
光
can see
这
everything.
不能见啊！就如果就
This
是
is
这
called
个阳
seeing.
光也没有啊，就是
If
月光也没有，灯光
it
也
were
没有的
not
话
for
呢，
these
那这
three
个
kinds
漆
of
黑一片了
lights,
啊，就是身属不知，身
they
属不
would
见无
not
知
be
处。
able to see.
那这个时候的
For
话呢，
example,
那就是
if
实践
there's
人
no
的话呢，
sunlight,
就是肯
moonlight,
定
and
说
there's
是不
no
能见的，这个很简单。
lamplight,
就是我们
then
也可
everything
能
would be
会这样
extremely
说
dark.
的啊。黑暗的时候呢，
Then
我们什
people
么
would
都
say
见不
that,
到，
oh, I
就是
cannot
这个叫
see.
不见。然后有了月光和有了物质
But
和
once
有了
there
这些东
is
西，
the
就是
sun,
什么
moon,
因缘都
and
具
lamp's
足的时候
light,
呢，就是能
with
看得
all
到，
of
就是
those
这个叫
causes
做见到。
conditions,
那这个时候
then
呢，就是
people
佛
would
陀就
say
开
that
始驳
they
他
could
的这个
see.
观点了。阿难呢，
Now
就
the
如
Buddha started
无
to
明
refute
是
Ananda's
明不见，
point of
因
view.
不见暗。
The Buddha said that
若比见
Ananda, if
暗
it is called
比
not seeing when there is no
此
light,
此
you
但
should not
无
see
明
darkness.
和无见，就是那么下面
If
呢，
in fact you
就
do
开
see
始阿难
darkness,
刚才
which
就是
is
说的
none
只
other
有
than
三
the
种
lack
光
of
的
light,
前提下
how
是
can you
见得到
say
的，其他见不
there
到的话呢，
is an
那就
absence
开
of
始
seeing?
破这个阿难的观点。那如果这样的话呢，就是你这个没有光明的时候，
The
那
Buddha
就是叫
started
不
to
见
say
是吧？
that, well,
如果
since
没
you
有
said
光明
that
的时候，
without
就是不
light
见的话呢，
is
那
called not
应
seeing,
就是应该呢，就是不
then
能见
what
黑
you
暗
call
啊，就是
not
不能见黑
seeing
暗。
should
其
also
实我
include
们前
not
面也
seeing
分析过，就
darkness.
是这个我
When
们
it
实践
comes
人
to
这样
not
的话
seeing
呢，就是啊，
darkness,
就是
I think we've
漆黑
already
一片的是
discussed
见
that
不到的。
earlier as well.
但是
Because
在这个
according
时
to
候
the
呢，就是
worldly
就黑
beings,
暗呢，
when
要
it's
要承
completely
认有
dark,
要
when it's
见的
pitch
啊，就你
black,
刚才
we
说
should
是
not be able to
如果
see
黑暗的
anything.
时候
But
呢
at
不
that
见，
time,
那这样的话呢，是不是
you
黑暗
still
也是
see
不见？
darkness.
若比见暗，如果是你能见到暗的话呢，
But if you
那
can
就
still
是
see
这个呢，就是
darkness,
实际上只是这个
it is
没有这
simply
种
that
光明而
you
已。就
can
是怎么
see,
会是
but
无见
you
呢？
see
啊，就
darkness
是没有
because
没
there
有
is a
没
lack
有光
of
明的
light.
名字呢，就是叫做是这个无见，就是实际上呢，你怎么承认是
Not
无见的？你
seeing
见到黑暗也是见到了。啊，就见到黑暗也是
should
见
be
到
not seeing
啊。那你
darkness as
如
well.
果只是这光明当中就是
Because
见
if you
到
can't
的，
see
就是黑暗
darkness,
当中见
you
到的，
shouldn't say
你
that
不
you don't
不
see
算
anything.
见的话呢，那就是下面会分析的，就是光明也不算见到。
If
这
you
个
were to say
见
that
到
the
的，
seeing
因为没有
darkness
见
is
黑
not
暗的
seeing,
缘故，就
then
是
seeing
下面
light
可能也好像
is
记得有
not
分析的。
shouldn't be considered as seeing
所
either.
以我们有时候呢，
So
就是
there's
分
a
析一下，
further
就是这
analysis
个
in
佛
the
陀的
later
话呢，
part. Sometimes I think
我
we
们就是
should
把它不说是他的这个端正的
contemplate
正
in
道，
such
就
a
是
way
他是
that
实践的一个
the
一般
Buddha,
人的话呢，
even
他的
if
智
we
慧
do
呢，
not
就是应该是
think,
很
even talk
很
about
尖
all
锐
of
的，
the
就是我
great
们就是
merits
因为
of
我们当场的这
eradicating
个看不到这个阿
and
难是到底是什么样，佛陀是什么样的。但是他们两个之间的这样的
enlightenment,
辩论的话呢，我们
eradication
个
and
人呢，也是能
enlightenment,
去分析的。
if we
那
were
这分析
to
的过
think
程
of
当
him
中啊，
as
就是
just
确实
an
这个佛陀
ordinary
的智慧
being
的话呢，
in
这
this
个确
world,
实在2500多年
his
前的有这
wisdom
么
is
精彩
still
的一个辩论
extremely extremely sharp. Just to think about that scene, though that we were not there, we couldn't see it there, but through their debate, the coming back and forth between Ananda and Buddha, we're still quite impressed by the great wisdom of the Buddha. And that happened about 2,500 years ago. What an excellent debate.
就是那分析的时候呢，如果阿难这样一说的话，我们可能说对，阿难你说的是对，就是黑暗的色呢。
And you can place yourself at the same situation if you don't believe it.
但是这个光明呢可以见到。
If you were to be questioned by Ananda, how would you then analyze it for Ananda? Maybe sometimes you would be taken away by Ananda's view, and whenever Ananda says so and so, you would be like, yes, that's right, you're right. Since when it's dark, we can't see, this is called not seeing. When there is light, we can see, therefore it is seeing. Because that's worldly people's consideration. That's what they would accept as the truth. But the Buddha speaks other than the worldly perspective. His perception surpassed that of the ordinary. And he started to analyze to Ananda. Ananda, if when it is dark, you call it not seeing because you do not see light, then since it is now light, you do not see the characteristic of darkness, it should also be called not seeing. Isn't that interesting? Because the worldly view, if according to the conventional worldly view, I don't think we will be able to come up with such great debate. But right away, the Buddha would be able to eradicate the wrong view and eradicate the conceptual understanding of Ananda. So the Buddha then said that thus the two characteristics would be both called not seeing. If you were to say that you don't see light, then you don't see darkness. If you were to say that you see darkness, you don't see light. So vice versa. Although these two characteristics replace one another, your seeing nature does not lapse for an instant. Thus, you can know that there is seeing in both cases. Now, then, can you say there is no seeing? This is to give an example that when there is light, then darkness has already been dispelled and light took its place, and it could be exactly the other way around. But in that case, it doesn't mean that you temporarily don't have the seeing nature when there is a switch of darkness and lightness. It is that when you see lightness, you don't see darkness, but your seeing nature is still existent. When there is darkness, though you don't see brightness, but your seeing nature is still existent. You shouldn't say that, oh, when there's light and I don't see darkness, therefore my seeing nature is disappeared. So your seeing nature doesn't correlate to lightness or darkness because because if you were to say that they're correlated, then there is the birth and death of darkness and lightness, which then refer to that your seeing nature has birth and death as well, but that is not true. If you were to have a little bit of recognition at the time you have greed, it disappears. At the time you generate a bit of anger, it then runs away. It is not to follow our conventional mind. Your seeing nature is also appears at the same time it disappears, and disappears at the same time it appears. But it is not true. The Buddha then said that thus you can know that there is seeing in both cases. How then can you say there is no seeing? Both of them can be called as seeing. You can see both light and dark. At that time, in fact, there is no alternation of the existence of the seeing nature. Your seeing nature had never disappeared. And then, what is the seeing nature? This seeing nature that's expounded by the Buddha is just like the direct pointing out of the nature of mind. This is one of the most important teaching given in Zen Buddhism on the seeing of nature of mind. So how is it expounded then? This is a very profound teaching given. So over here, the Buddha said that, therefore, Ananda, you should know that when you see light, the seeing is not the light. When you see darkness, the seeing is not the darkness. When you see emptiness, the seeing is not emptiness. When you see solid objects, the seeing is not solid objects.
最后的话呢，得出这样的一个结论，安了，你应该要知道。你应该知道的时候呢，你见这个光明的时候呢，
This is the conclusion by saying that, Ananda, you should know that when you see brightness,
不是这个命啊，
in fact, the seeing nature is not brightness.
光明嘛，你的这个见性是光明，就是那么这个时候呢，你的见呢，就是并不是使这个你的这个命啊。然而你见到这个黑暗的时候呢，那你见的呢，就是并不是这个黑暗。
What you see is not this darkness, and when you see emptiness, your seeing nature is not this emptiness. And when you see objects that blocks, then your seeing nature is not the objects. Which means that by the changes of brightness and darkness and emptiness as well as objects, our conventional mind would make changes. But our eye consciousness, at that time, our eye consciousness would change as well. But the seeing nature will not change because of any of those. It is not that when you see brightness or darkness and then they would change. It is not like that. Based on the previous questions and answers, this particular conclusion should be valid. It is to say that our nature of mind does not change based on the brightness or darkness of external world or the emptiness and objects to change. It is not to say that my mind changes based on my eye consciousness follows this or that. The eye consciousness changes based on lightness and darkness and emptiness and objects, but the seeing nature doesn't change based on that. This is the key here. Having realized these four meanings, you should also know that when you see your seeing, the seeing is not the seeing to be seen, since the former seeing is beyond the later, and the later cannot reach it.
见有逆见呢，就是见不能见。这个光这样说的话，可能很多人都不知道是啥意思。
When one says that, then I think it's very difficult to understand.
当你那个见性，就是它前面的见是见性的意思。当你那个
The first seeing is the seeing of the nature.
这个起现的时候呢，就是见性当中起那个见分的时候，就是
When the seeing nature first arises, the aspect of seeing. I think I've read many commentaries on it, but I think Master Oyi's explanation is probably easier to understand. He said that when you're at the time of the seeing nature arises, there is an aspect that is seeing, which is more leaning towards the eyes. That aspect of seeing. The seeing that's related to your eyes, that is not true seeing, because that's a seeing of characteristics. But the seeing nature is parted from that seeing through the eyes. This kind of seeing nature is parted from the seeing of brightness, of emptiness, of darkness, and so on. As the seeing through the eyes, the conventional seeing does not even come close to the seeing nature. In fact, seeing and seeing, though they're the same term, same word that's used, but the connotation and the meaning is completely different. The great masters from Ming Dynasty, Song Dynasty, and even Qing Dynasty, when they read to this part about when you see your seeing, the seeing is not the seeing to be seen. When they read to that part, many attained realization. I believe, according to the great master's biography in Ming Dynasty, there was a great master whose name is Master Huqiu. When he was 9 years old, he got ordination, and then after studying mainly precepts, he later met a great master whose name is Yuan Wu. And Master Yuan Wu asked Huqiu, saying this particular verse of the seeing is not the seeing to be seen. When you see your seeing, after he said that, he extended his fist to show Master Huqiu. And then Master Huqiu said that, yes, I see. And then Master Yuan Wu said that, what kind of understanding do you have? And started to scold him. And because of his scolding, right away he attained realization. And he attained this realization because of this particular verse. After he attained realization, he was able to naturally and spontaneously flow out of wisdom words. In terms of the realization stories in Zen Buddhism, there are some that's about the genuine realization, and there are lots about the false realization too. Many of those stories were recorded back then. Back in Qing Dynasty, there was another master who's in fact, a great lay practitioner whose name was Wu Huan, without illusion. When he read till this part, he also attained liberation over here. After attaining realization, he went to Master Nangu and asked Master Nangu to validate his level of realization. Therefore, the master asked him, "Do you see anything?" And then this lay practitioner said that he said that his realization is like releasing a crow in the midnight. This particular expression in Zen Buddhism, in the dark night, if one were to release a crow, a black bird, that is a seeing, and that is the expression of realization of his. Another master, according to the great master's biography, it says that there was once a Zen master whose name is Master Puji. He also read this particular verse and then attained realization. After his attainment, he started to build many monasteries and started to propagate the Dharma and benefit sentient beings, and he had a great activity in this world. Many stories like such. I hope for such kind of profound verses which brought many great masters to attain liberation and profound levels of realization should be written down by us and then post them at places that we can often see, even if we don't attain realization at the first time or second time, and slowly, eventually, those words and those meanings would be able to get into our heart heart.
就真见这个真正见到这个自己的本体的时候呢，确实是
Some masters say that if one were to see the true nature, then that is beyond the character of seeing.
会明白的。所以说呢，
Maybe these are not very clear to you, but when at the time of attaining this, you would be able to understand it. So the Buddha then continued to say to Ananda by saying that, that being the case, how can you say that your absolute intuition perception has something to do with causes and conditions or spontaneity, or that it has something to do with mixing and uniting? At this point, if you were to say that the causes and conditions, the spontaneity and mixes and the uniting, those are the real seeing, that is not valid. The Tibetan translation is a bit different, but I don't think we need to get into it.
然后呢，就是说这个，接下来就是如等圣闻啊，就是下面。
And then the Buddha said that you narrow-minded Shravakas, the sound hearers, are so inferior and ignorant that you're unable to penetrate through to the purity of the characteristic of reality. So the Buddha started to scold him and the Shravakas by saying that you have such narrow mind and your wisdom is also very shallow. But really, when we think about these group of Shravakas, they already attained the realization of selflessness, of a self, or they have at least attained the first fruition. They're already much better than all of us who are still mundane beings. Look at the human beings nowadays, only thinking about wealth and thinking about materialistic gain, or thinking about relationships, thinking about social status, and thinking about to spend their life in peaceful ways. But there is no understanding of the profound Dharma and the profound understanding of emptiness. So if the Buddha were to scold us, indeed it would be more appropriate. The sentient beings who have more afflictions and much worse negative karmas. The Buddha then said that, now I will teach you, you should consider it well and do not become weary or negligent on the wonderful road to Bodhi. So the Buddha over here specifically said that I've already given you such profound teachings, which is the wisdom of teaching. So all of you, the assembly and Ananda, you should continuously to contemplate upon it. This is the wisdom that can be generated through contemplation. So you should not be weary nor negligent. This is the diligence on the practice. So one should not get lazy and get tired and weary. This is part of the wisdom that can be generated through practice. This is the kind of practice that we should do in our daily life, the actual action of treading on the path of the Bodhi. We should not give up because of any little obstacles. We shouldn't stop. We definitely should not give up. All of those are not appropriate ways of treading onto the path of liberation. You have to have a mind of diligence. We have to supplicate to the Guru and the Three Jewels so that we can continuously to tread forward on the path of liberation. Now this is the 10th one. Now we should stop on the class of Surangama Sutra.